TV private eye craze, I immersed myself in Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, Earl Stanley Gardner, and Mickey Spillane. The key figure there is probably Spillane, because the paperback racks and used bookstores were swimming in Mike Hammer imitations. I read every private eye paperback I could lay my hands on, and my first sex education lessons came courtesy of Richard Prather's leering Shel Scott novels. Starting in the 9th grade, I began trying to write my own private eye novels, and while I never found a publisher for any of the half-dozen or so, thank God, I learned a lot. By the time I got out of high school, I had professional skills few young writers possessed, and maybe some talent. Along the way, however, a couple of things happened. For one, spies and their high-tech world had taken the place of private eyes in popular culture. In fact, my last high school novel was about a spy named, are you ready for this? Eric Flair. There's a little noted irony here. Mickey Spillane was on his famous decade-long hiatus between Hammer novels, from Kiss Me Deadly in 1952 to The Girl Hunters in 62, and his paperback publisher, NAL, sought to fill the gap with a writer named Ian Fleming, who had been branded the British Mickey Spillane. Signet even used the same cover artist. Just when the Vietnam War was becoming a major campus issue, I was entering college, and anti-heroes were taking over the screens and paperback racks. After seeing the Lee Marvin, John Borman film Point Blank, I got hooked on the source material, the hard-bitten series about one named thief, Parker, Don Westlake writing as Richard Stark. Jim Thompson, Lawrence Block, and Dan Marlowe were also writing crook books, and I was already a fan of James M. Cain, The Postman Always Rings Twice, Double Indemnity, and W.R. Burnett, Asphalt Jungle, High Sierra. The notion of writing about a criminal protagonist seemed a simple step to one side from tough detectives. Among my other enthusiasms growing up were police procedurals. The obsession of my childhood was the Dick Tracy comic strip, never dreaming I would take the strip over from Chester Gould himself one day. And I loved Jack Webb's 1950s Dragnet TV series, as well as a paperback series commissioned to take advantage of Webb's Tube success, Ed McBain's great dialogue-driven 87th Precinct crime novels. So in addition to training to write private eye novels, I felt ready to take on police procedurals as a form. But there was a problem. In the late 60s and early 70s, cops were guys with nightsticks clubbing my friends at Chicago's 1968 Democratic Convention. So crook books it was. My early career consisted of novels about a Parker-like thief known as Nolan and a Vietnam-traumatized hitman called Quarry. Yet I still dreamed of finding a meaningful way to write about private eyes. My mystery-writing amateur sleuth, Mallory, was essentially an unlicensed private eye and appeared in 5 novels during this same period. But the traditional private eye himself seemed to have no place in contemporary pop culture. Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe, and Mike Hammer were fondly remembered, but frozen in the amber of their times. Well, I was wrong. Plenty of writers came along in the later 70s and beyond to find interesting ways to tell private eye stories in modern dress. Eventually, so would I, in the graphic novel series Ms. Tree. But back around 1974, I was longing to write the pure P.I., the tough, tender guy in the trench coat and fedora with a bottom-drawer bottle of rye, W-R-Y. I didn't want to update him, nor did I wish to plop him down in contemporary times like a drunk who tumbled off a time machine. This classic character, as devised by Hammett, refined by Chandler, and redefined by Spillane, is a prototypical American hero, a child of the Old West by way of the Great Depression, and a World War or two, whose voice is as wonderfully distinctively American as Huckleberry Finn's. I remained enthralled by Chandler's first-person poetry and fascinated by Spillane's war-traumatized knight in a surrealistic world. But it was Hammett who showed the way. Back in '74, I was rereading for the umpteenth time the greatest of all detective novels, The Maltese Falcon, when I noticed the copyright, which stopped me long enough to muse. 1929, year of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Al Capone and Sam Spade were contemporaries. In the comics business, like Spillane and Hammett, I'm a veteran of that field, a light bulb would have popped on above me. The private eye had been around long enough to exist in a historical context.